The Atlantic looks calm from the shore, but it keeps its own kind of ledger, of cables and convoys, patrol arcs and storm tracks, where presence is power and absence is vulnerability. Guarding one of the most strategic corners of that ocean is a country many still picture through pastries and football. Portugal doesn't object. Let them underestimate. Meanwhile, Lisbon quietly runs a playbook built on reach, readiness, and relentless watchstanding. A maritime nation whose military might is, frankly, on another level. Portugal's strategy starts with geography, but ends with discipline. The mainland is just the porch. The home is the water. The Azores in the mid-Atlantic, Madeira on the southern gate, and an exclusive economic zone that sprawls like a continent at sea. Those islands are unsinkable airfields and sonar pickets. Those waters are responsibility written in nautical miles. When your backyard is the ocean, the mission is continuous. Monitor, deter, interdict, rescue. If it sounds unglamorous, good. You're getting the point. Real power in the Atlantic is a long, quiet endurance, not a parade. History sharpened that endurance. Colonial wars taught Portugal the art of lean expeditionary force. The Carnation Revolution rewired the state. NATO membership fused Portuguese units into the alliance's muscle memory. From the Balkans to Africa to the Baltic, the pattern repeats. Arrive early, integrate fast, deliver competence. In aviation ready rooms and wardrooms across Europe, Portuguese detachments have the same reputation as a good wrench. Unassuming, indispensable. This is a maritime-first military, and the soul of it is the Navy. On the surface, 5 frigates carry the high-end burden, air defense, escort, and task group work, while a growing constellation of offshore patrol vessels covers the relentless business of sovereignty, fisheries protection, boarding operations, and long-endurance presence missions in rough water. Below, 2 Trident-class submarines based on the Type 214 with air-independent propulsion turn swaths of Atlantic into a guessing game for anyone with mischief on their mind. In plain English, a pair of quiet predators stalking the thermocline, backed by skippers who know every eddy between the shelf and the deep. Portugal operates 2 U-209PN/Trident boats. The Navy deploys them routinely for North Atlantic patrols. The Fuzileiros, the Marines, are Portugal's amphibious hinge between sea and shore. They board at night, secure perimeters by dawn, and treat grey zone complexity like a Tuesday. Their special operations cousins do the missions that never make it into press releases, reconnaissance in ugly littorals, surgical interdictions at sea, and the kind of low-signature work that spooks pirates and smugglers into sudden honesty. If you think a small navy can't do hard things, ask the boarding ladders bolted to Portuguese frigates. They've seen enough night water to qualify for a storm naming convention. Portuguese SAR crews say their Merlins don't mind gale force crosswinds. They just call it character building. And Marines who spend nights boarding in Atlantic chop insist that gym legs are fine, but deck legs are forever. Overhead, the Portuguese Air Force runs lean, modern and mission first. The backbone is a fighter community that keeps quick reaction alert humming at home and deploys east when NATO needs air policing. Short punchy data check. Portugal fields 28 modernized F-16 AM/BM fighters, the product of the MLU program that keeps the fleet interoperable and credible. They've been busy in the Baltics, reminding wayward aircraft that maps have borders. F-16 pilots say the best Baltic de-icing fluid is Portugal in July. Now, the force is stretching its legs. In 2025, Portugal received its 3rd Embraer KC-390 Millennium, a jet transport that can airdrop, haul heavy, refuel in the air, and land on short strips, and went further, signing an amendment to add a 6th aircraft to the fleet. One country's logistics plane is another strategy. With the KC-390, Lisbon can surge troops, evacuate citizens, and move aid across oceans on its own clock. The patrol and surveillance backbone is equally deliberate. C-295s with maritime patrol kits sweep the EEZ. SAR crews in AW101 Merlins fly into weather that most pilots define as a hard no. And joint centers fuse AIS data, satellite feeds, and radar returns into an ocean picture that ships can act on. It's not a single wonder weapon. It's a mesh. air, sea, satellite, stitched together so cleanly that when a distress call hits, an aircraft is already pivoting and a ship is already turning into the swell. On land, Portugal doesn't try to be a tank park with its own postal code. It builds brigades that move fast, plug into allied formations without friction, and bring specialized teeth to the fight. The Intervention Brigade's anti-aircraft battalion is finally getting the love it asked for. Portugal contracted through NATO's NSPA to bring in Thales's Force Shield system, bolstering very short-range air defense and hardening expeditionary units against drones and low flyers. That's a sentence only logisticians could love, but it's how you keep columns alive in the age of cheap UAVs. Timeline matters, so let's call it out. In 2024, the Army inked the Force Shield deal via NSPA. In February 2025, Portugal joined Germany's European Sky Shield Initiative, ESSI, the multi-layered European air and missile defense umbrella, a clear sign that Lisbon is serious about the medium and long-range layers it historically lacked. By June and July 2025, the Air Force logged the third KC-390 and watched the A-29N Super Tucano begin its European flight tests. And by September 2025, Lisbon formalized that sixth KC-390, turning a smart transport plan into a strategic statement. That's not noise, that's tempo. Money is not a rumor anymore. Portugal's military programming law 2023 to 2034 commits approximately 5.57 billion euros to modernization across all services, a long horizon plan that prioritizes readiness over ribbon cuttings. The army alone is set to receive over 1.2 billion euros as part of that package, but the orchestration is joint. Ships refit, aircraft update, units re-equip, networks harden. And because Europe is finally putting real financing behind collective defense, Lisbon can lean into EU instruments like Rearm Europe Readiness 2030, which aims to mobilize up to 800 billion euros across the continent via loans, fiscal flexibility, and joint procurement. That's how a small state scales. 5.57 billion euros to 2034 under the LPM. EU's Rearm framework opens access to financing for joint buys. Transparency time. Procurement is a battlefield of its own, and Portugal is fighting through it. The Navy's 3 Vasco da Gama-class frigates need midlife upgrades to remain relevant to 2035. As of fall 2025, NSPA has issued the RFP to modernize up to 2 ships, with work planned at Arsenal do Alfeite between 2026 and 2028. But the actual contract award is still pending. That's the unglamorous gap between ambition and steel on blocks, and Portugal's candid about it. At the same time, the defence staff knows what comes after that. A programme to replace 5 ageing frigates with a new class, sized for high-end tasking. That conversation is no longer theoretical. It's reflected in the LPM and in industry feelers. Under the waves, the next big decision is even more consequential. 2 submarines can cover a lot of ocean if they're quiet, well-maintained, and well-crewed. But to guarantee deterrence in the 2030s, the Navy wants more hulls. The Chief of Naval Staff has already proposed buying 2 additional submarines. In 2025, reports surfaced that Lisbon is exploring options including South Korean designs. Eyes on next-gen subs is not a rumour. It's part of a deliberate posture shift for a nation that guards cable routes and choke points. 2 Tridente-class today, Navy leadership has floated adding 2 more, evaluations running into 2025. Comparative lens, very briefly. Unlike Spain, whose Navy anchors on high-end Aegis frigates and a large amphibious flagship, Portugal emphasises multitasking patrol ships, expeditionary boarding teams, and the logistics to sustain far-flung Atlantic missions. Different neighbours, different chessboards. The Iberian contrast isn't rivalry. It's complementary roles within NATO's maritime architecture. One swats ballistic threats, the other holds the oceanic beat and shows up everywhere from the fjords to the tropics. Interoperability is Portugal's stealth superpower. Lisbon buys carefully, upgrades smartly, and integrates relentlessly. The Force Shield contract ran through NSPA. The frigate MLURFP runs through NSPA. Medium and long-range air defence ambition now runs through ESSI, and the financing environment is buttressed by the EU's Rearm framework. This is how a country multiplies impact, standardize with allies, share sustainment backbones, and feed lessons learned into NATO's training cycle. To an operator, this reads like fuel, spares, and tactics that all speak the same language. Let's dive a layer deeper into the order of battle with a few spotlight stats that matter to planners and satisfy the spreadsheet crowd. Fighters, 28 F-16 AM/BM MLU standard, with pilots who routinely deploy for Baltic air policing. Interceptions logged, professionalism noted. Strategic airlift and refuel, 3 KC-390 delivered by July 2025, a 6th on order as of September 2025, creating a fleet that can move a battalion and its kit or refuel fighters on long legs. Subsurface, 2 Tridente-class AIP boats, routinely tasked to North Atlantic patrol boxes. Surface, 5 frigates in 2 classes, with MLU planning gated through NSPA. Ground-based air defense, VSHORAD, force shield system contracted via NSPA, with ESSI membership, positioning Portugal for future medium-range procurement. Budgets, €5.57 billion through 2034 under the LPM, with EU-level instruments designed to open joint purchase pathways. These aren't slogans, they're the scaffolding of real capability. And yet, Portugal keeps its humour. SAR pilots in Merlins fly into storms that look like a washing machine set to doom cycle. Marines joke that they've boarded everything but a ghost ship, though on night watches in the fog, they're open-minded. Fighter crews explain Baltic weather with charts, then summarise with a shrug and bring fuel. Submariners drink coffee strong enough to refloat a corvette. This is not flippancy. It's how professionals process a hard job and then do it anyway. Modernization isn't just hardware, it's doctrine and data. Portugal is pushing maritime domain awareness that fuses satellite imagery, AIS anomalies, and long-range radar into actionable blue. That's exactly the kind of capability partners covet during exercises off the Azores and in NATO venues like REPMUS and Dynamic Messenger, where Portugal acts as host, integrator, and innovator for unmanned systems at sea. In an age where drones skim waves and lurk underwater, being the Navy that writes the playbook as well as runs it is a force multiplier. There are hard truths too. Maintenance pipelines are stressed like everyone else's. One frigate is always in deeper work than planned, one aircraft misses a deployment window, one requisition waits for a budget minute. Portugal's answer is to keep the centre of gravity on the mission set it cannot afford to fail. Maritime security in the EEZ and across the Atlantic approaches, air policing in the Alliance's sky corridors, SAR as a moral obligation, and coalition deployment that stabilise frayed edges before they snap. When resources tighten, priorities get honest. Policy is aligning with practice. In June 2025, Lisbon publicly brought forward its pledge to meet NATO's 2% of GDP defence investment to this year, 4 years ahead of the previous timeline. It wasn't just a number. It signalled that Portugal understands what a busy ocean and a wobbly world demand. That boost doesn't turn the country into a big-ticket spender, but it does put fuel behind the programs that matter. Frigate life extension, patrol ship rollouts, fighter avionics and munitions, survivable ground-based air defence, and the ISR grid that ties it all together. Zoom out to the strategic picture. If conflict ever spilled toward NATO's western flank, Portugal wouldn't pretend to be a fleet in being that it isn't. It would be exactly what it is: a maritime scout with 2 silent hunters, an escort and ASW contributor whose frigates know formation work, an airlift and refueling hub with jets that shrink distance, a guardian of the Azores and Madeira, where Allied aircraft stretch their legs, a boarding force that makes bad actors change plans, a SAR service that turns tragedies into close calls. Deterrence by competence is underrated until you need it. Then, it's priceless. The modernization horizon reads like a to-do list with momentum behind it. In 2025, Portugal joined ESSI to plug the medium and long-range holes in ground-based air defence. The Army's VSHORAD layer started arriving by way of NSPA and TALIS. A 3rd KC-390 landed with a 6th ordered. The frigate midlife path moved into the RFP stage, and policymakers locked in the 2% defence effort. By 2030, expect this to translate into fresher sensors at sea, more resilient air defense on land, and a transport fleet that turns support into speed. By 2034, the end of the LPM horizon, Lisbon aims to close legacy gaps, field new surface combatants, and make real decisions on next-gen submarines. That's a clear line from present to future, not wish-casting. Let's address a final set of contrasts with neighbour context in mind. Spain, with its Aegis umbrellas, blue water amphibious flagship, and new S-80 submarines, invests in heavyweight toolsets designed for high-end fights and expeditionary projection. Portugal, by design, pours attention into multi-role patrol ships, boarding teams, special operations at sea, and a transport fleet that makes distance small. The two approaches aren't in competition. They're a matched set in the Iberian Atlantic theatre. NATO loves a duet where one voice belts and the other never runs out of breath. If you want to see how Portugal's quiet power plays on the world stage, track the little things that become big things. A Portuguese detachment keeps the Baltic quieter for a season, and a fragile diplomatic thread holds. A frigate escorts a carrier group without drama, and the mission stays on schedule. A submarine shows up unannounced, only on someone else's sonar, and a reconnaissance vessel bluntly recalculates its appetite for risk. A KC-390 moves pallets of aid into a storm belt, and a bad week becomes survivable. These are small stories. They add up. So, where does this all land? Here, Portugal's military might is not a flex, it's a function. It functions because geography demands it, history refines it, and policy now funds it. It functions across timelines, rescuing today, deterring tonight, modernizing for 2030, planning for 2034. It functions within alliances, NSPA handling the buys, ESSI knitting air defense, EU instruments greasing finance, and NATO task groups giving Portuguese decks the kind of work that keeps them sharp. And it functions with integrity, a small force that tells the truth about its gaps and then closes them, piece by piece. As Portugal boosts its defense budget, deploys a growing KC-390 fleet, and eyes next-gen submarines and frigates, its quiet professionalism only grows more relevant on NATO's Atlantic flank. The ocean is busy, the cables are vulnerable, the weather is indifferent, and on the western doorstep of Europe, a country with a sailor's soul keeps watch. Not loud, not flashy, just effective. That's another level, and that's exactly where Portugal intends to stay.